יש פתגם ביידיש, jeder Mensch weiß, als wird sterben, aber keiner will es nicht glauben. כל אדם יודע שהוא ימות, אבל אף אחד לא רוצה להאמין לזה. אבא, בשבילי היית ספר של חיים. שרדת יחיד מהמשפחה שלך בשואה הנוראה, ואז עברת לארצות הברית ושיקמת את החיים שלך. באופן כללי במשך השנים היית בריא ושקדת על מחקריך כל השנים, בעיקר כמובן הסדרה הגדולה מקורות ומסורות, ואפילו הספקת לכתוב עוד כמה מסכתות דבכים ומנחות, ולא הספקת להביא את הדברים לדפוס, ועליי הוטלה המשימה להשלים את התהליך של הבאה לדפוס. מאוד רצינו שתזכה לראות גם את הכרך הזה, אבל לא הסתייע מילתא. אבל אבא, אני מבטיח לך, אנחנו עובדים על זה בעזרת השם מקרוב, גם הכרך הזה יצא לאור. בשנים האחרונות שהמצב המנטלי שלך הידרדר, כמובן זה היה קשה לכל אחד מסביבך. הרגשתי לא פעם, הנה משהו שאני רוצה לדבר עם אבא, לשאול אותו מה הוא כתב, או אפילו על נושא אחר. והנה פיזית הוא פה, אבל אני לא יכול לדבר איתו יותר. לפעמים הייתי צריך לשאול מישהו אחר, אתה מבין מה שאבא כתב? וכמובן, עם הזמן שגם מצבך הפיזי הידרדר, היה לנו יותר קשה, אבל בכל זאת, אלה החיים. אבל כמובן, הגעת למצב שבו כל בן אדם מגיע אליו, ואכן אינך יותר בעולם הזה. I would also like to add some words in English. But during your last years, when your health deteriorated, we employed the service of some Filipino caregivers, and particularly two brothers, Nico Bocanegra and John Bocanegra. And see, I can understand, I knew my father as a person, a scholar, a person I can talk to, and I assume that's true of many of the people here. You two of you came, and all you saw was an old man who's a wreck. And the two of you were so totally devoted to him. And I do not have sufficient words to express my gratitude to the two of you for what you did in taking care of my father during his last years. Thank you so much.
So please forgive me, I'm going to speak only in English. I need to be able to fully express myself at this moment, and given my emotional state right now, I can only do that in English. I'm going to leave it to others to talk about my father's scholarship, his contributions to Yiddishkeit, to the community in general, both here in Israel and in Chutz La'aretz, or his roles as a rabbi, doctor, professor. I want to speak about my father through the eyes of his youngest child. It is impossible to sum up all that my father was to me as a father in a few minutes, so I'll only be able to give you a small glimpse of what he meant to this child of his. Of course, talk to me in about 10 minutes from now, and I'll probably have a completely different set of emotions. My father and I enjoy discussing theology, particularly how God talks to us today through the language of halakha. How can we connect to God despite his apparent absence? We would ask each other. How does God communicate his expectations for our behavior? What role does man, with all his imperfections, play in that communication or setting of expectations? What was always striking to me was that for my father, the existence of God was never in doubt, despite all the potential evidence to the contrary. He was more concerned with how to reach God, who had distanced himself to the point of absence. Somehow his faith in God never wavered before, during, or after the war. To me, that was truly remarkable. I need the other version. I imagine that these types of theological conversations that I had with Abba as we walked to shul on Shabbat were not typical of most father-son conversations. This one's missing versions. Our favorite question, one which led me into thinking about the formation of the Talmud, was always, who said what to whom, and how much was subsequently altered or redacted? Or at least, that was his favorite question. I will admit that at times I was more concerned about the Mets' chances of making the World Series. I think that it was not until I had children of my own that I realized that not every father had that type of conversation with their child. My father spent his entire life in a determined effort to bring God, God's words, and God's mitzvot together in this world. And to do that, he found ways to connect with people where they were. For many, that was by studying text with them. For me, it was talking about God. The words that we were expressing may have been about the divine, but they were actually about us. In his non-judgmental and charming way, he would connect with people no matter what their background was. He told me on many occasions that he was quite proud that he was able to bring Judaism to his secular peers at Columbia through scholarship. That was their connection. That, to him, was a tremendous accomplishment. Abba had an ability to connect with people everywhere he went. In the early 2000s, in preparation to make Aliyah, he was apartment hunting to find a place within walking distance of the National Library on the Givat Ram campus. The real estate agent was worried about him moving to Israel on his own, late in life, in a country where they speak a different language than the one she thought he was used to. Isn't that ironic? But she needn't have worried. At every building they toured, he ran into somebody he knew who would ask, "Professor, Mataya Taole Arza, when are you moving to Israel? When will we see you in the library?" It's only a slight exaggeration to say that the entire city of Jerusalem was so excited when he moved here. Given the difficult backgrounds of both our parents, both of whom are Nitzilei Shoah, the fact that my brothers and I had childhoods filled with any amount of laughter, happiness, and success is a testament to my parents' perseverance. Neither my father nor my mother, Tzipora Zatzal, for that matter, ever gave up hope. They both moved forward in their own ways despite the incredible obstacles they had to overcome. They came to a new country, learned a new language, and adjusted to a new culture. They found each other and were blessed to raise a family. I can never thank them enough for the stability and love that they provided me, despite having just recently themselves escaped from hell itself. For my father to have survived and continued living in any shape or form was remarkable beyond words. To see what he saw, to experience what he did, and to somehow to make the choice over and over and over again to keep living was extraordinary. Abba deeply loved us and our spouses, Laura and Diane, cared so much for his incredible students and colleagues, and took great pride in his 6 grandchildren. He was very excited just as recently as last week when he learned, and again, that my son Avidan became engaged. You know, he forgot things, so it was always news to him when we told him that Avidan was engaged. And we know that he'll be with us dancing and present at Avidan and Yafa's upcoming wedding. The wedding will be further proof that he survived for yet another generation. All the factors were there for my father to have had a traumatic, miserable childhood, even if the Nazis had never existed. Money was no object for him and his family because they didn't have any. He literally slept on straw and used to tell me stories about the one coat his family had to share in the middle of the harsh winter nights in the Carpathian Mountains in order to go to the outhouse. His parents divorced when he was a very young child, and he hardly knew his father, who lived far away from him. His father was considered a bit of a laughingstock since he became entangled with a local charlatan. The older of his two sisters was inflicted with a chronic disease that made life difficult for all of them. Life should have been distressing for him. Sure, as I was growing up, there was plenty to resent, as any teenager would resent their parents. But in hindsight, I realized how remarkable it was to feel love and support from a man who came from a broken home that was subsequently destroyed. Yet somehow he figured out how to raise a family, love his children, without any role model from his childhood. Throughout his life, his face would always light up when he talked about Sighet, his hometown. To this day, in my mind, Sighet is not a real place that you can actually walk and touch the ground. To me, it's a mystical, imaginary place that only exists in the movies and in Abba's imagination. Somehow, some way, my father was able to transform his misery into beautiful, sweet memories. He was lucky enough to be extraordinarily close to his grandfather, Shaya, who I'm named after. So he did have a strong father figure in his life, even without a father. He might not have had money, but he certainly liked telling jokes about money. One of his favorites was about the father who woke his son up early one morning to go to shul. The son resisted and ultimately went along. On the way, they found a coin. "You see," said the father, "this is your reward for getting up early." "But father," the son replied, "whoever lost the coin got up even earlier." My father would tell us the joke 1,000 times, and he would laugh each time as if it was the first. His ability to find joy and happiness all around him, no matter what, is a trait that I certainly hope to inherit. My father may have seen the worst that man can do, but he also saw the best. Although we missed living closely to him all these years, he was warmly welcomed in Israel by so many of you that are here, and our family extends our thanks to everyone who gave Abba a ride, brought him Mishalach Manot, called him on the phone, visited. And to echo what Ephraim just said, the best that man can do also comes in the form of Nico and John. And John is here someplace. So I just want to make sure that he hears this, wherever he may be. There's John, over in the corner. These two men took such care of Abba in his last days. They treated him as if they were his own father. There's no way that we can repay what these two men did for him. From making sure he put on tefillin every day, to feeding him the raw onions that he loved so much to eat, to bringing him his Gemara, to spending sleepless nights with him at the hospital. They never wavered in their love and devotion to him. They are truly examples of the inherent goodness in man. John, of course, is here. Nico is traveling back from the Philippines, and hopefully will be here next week. I also want to thank our care manager, Rachel Green, who's here someplace also, of Belev Shalem, who helped us manage all the times we couldn't. Al achad kama v'kama Ephraim. If there ever was a definition of kibud av, it was you. Baruch and I did what we could from the States, but the burden of taking care of Abba once he was sick fell on you. And you carried it with strength that was unimaginable just a short time ago. Faced with challenges and difficulties that were beyond anything of us had had to experience before, you were steadfast in your determination to take the best possible care of Abba. For what it's worth, I noticed what you did for Abba. My kids noticed what you did for Abba. And most importantly, Abba knew what you did for him. If Abba's life goal was to bring more of the divine into this world, he succeeded through your actions. I can't thank you enough or say it loudly how you were Mekayim the mitzvah of Kibud Av. I've seen what sick parents can do to family dynamics. Baruch and Ephraim, I know how lucky we are that despite not always agreeing on the next course of action with Abba's care, we always knew that the three of us only wanted what was best for Abba, and that was our only and sole goal in his care. With that sole motivation, we were able to remain a close, tight-knit group of brothers with full respect and love for each other. It's the three of us now. And the care that we showed Mommy and Abba is the care that I know we will continue to show each other from this day going forward. And that is a great source of comfort for me. My father wrote in the preface of his book, Breaking the Tablets, dedicated to the row of five that arrived in Auschwitz on May 15, 1944, consisting of grandfather, mother, aunt, sister, and myself. Grandfather and mother destined to the gas chambers, aunt and sister to prolonged suffering until they succumbed. And I survived alone to tell, to remind, and to demand. Well, Abba, you are not alone anymore. You have children and grandchildren who hear your command, and countless of students as well. It is our job now to continue the work you and Mommy began. So the work that Abba started continues. I know to heal from the grief I now feel is a long, hard, and arduous process. But Abba would insist that it must be done, for there is work still to be done. My task going forward is to continue to bring God into this world in ways that would make my father proud. I accept that challenge. Tehi nishmato tzura b'tzur ha'chaim. May the memory of my father, Avi Mori Harav David ben Ephraim Betzalel, be for a blessing.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm one of Saba's granddaughters, and I wrote something for you. Saba, many people can speak to your incredible scholarship, revolutionary Talmudic ideas. I am certain of that, given how many beautiful messages, special stories we've heard in the past few days. You touched so many people. But that's not how I knew you. I knew you as Saba. I walked into your apartment, and your face would instantly brighten with excitement. Your blue eyes would twinkle, and your voice was filled with joy. I can still hear it now. You're the only 94-year-old I knew who could rock Crocs. I feel so lucky and privileged that I got to spend last year in Jerusalem visiting you even during COVID. I remember countless times walking over or taking the bus to your apartment. I would bring strawberries from the shuk or baked chocolate chip challah for you, your favorite. And we would walk around the block together, making sure you got your exercise. You would ask what I was studying, and then instantly start reciting the phrase from the Gemara from memory before I could even finish my sentence. I remember going to your apartment on Yom HaShoah last year. I was so proud of you and your story, and I shared it all the time. During our visits, I would remind you that I was going to Columbia. Your face would brighten. You'd lean in as if you had a secret to share. You know, I was at Columbia? Yes, I'd smile. That's why I wanted to go. Good was your response. When I landed in Israel 2 weeks ago, the first place I went was to your apartment. I came with 2 friends. They were practically begging me to let them come meet you. As we were leaving, you asked them if they were married. We laughed and said no, and then you eyed me, raised your eyebrows. It was a signal. You were always thinking about our future. All 6 of your grandchildren are making you proud. We live by your legacy, each in our own way, every day. Abidan's going into Jewish education, Daniel will be a doctor, Hadari a scientist, Jamin is going to win Pras Yisrael for Rubik's Cubing, and Eliana, well, you'll be the next RBG, and we really need an RBG right now. Your memory will live on in everything we do, whether it be mumbling stuff at the Pesach Seder or upholding the Jewish values that you believed in so deeply. We love you, and we miss you so much.
Thank you all for coming. I'm also going to speak in English, and my reason is a little different. And it's because growing up, I always spoke to Abba in English. So I have to say goodbye in English. How did he do it? His thinking was so groundbreaking, transformative, radical. The ideas that he came up with, and not only did he come up with these ideas, but he was able to communicate these radically transformative ideas, and the number of people here coming to see him and watching the live stream is evidence of the impact that those radical new ideas have had. How did that happen? Think of these ideas. Theologically, biblically, Talmudically, he was radical, and radical. Theologically, he wrote about Auschwitz and how God can be perfect and all good, and the Jews didn't do anything bad, and the Jews got punished, and why, and how do we explain this? And he said, well, there was a revelation on Mount Sinai, and there was a very different revelation at Auschwitz. Talk about something that was theologically radical, biblically radical. He said, well, there's the documentary hypothesis, and there's Torah min hashamayim. Fully reconcilable, he wrote. This was like the old joke that he loved to tell. 2 people with a dispute come to the rabbi, and the rabbi listens to one and he says, you're right, and he listens to the other one and says, you're right, and one of the students says to the rabbi, how can they both be right? And of course the rabbi says, you're also right. A joke we all know. Nothing better illustrated that than his radical thinking and reconciliation in the biblical world. But of course, ultimately, in heart and in soul, he was a Talmud Chacham. He was a Talmudist. And there too, he was radical. He got up and he said, 2/3 of the Gemara, the Stam, 2/3 of the Gemara is late. Now what does that mean? There is so much contained in that phrase, the Stam is late. Historically, it's significant. It means 2/3 of the Gemara was compiled hundreds and hundreds of years after the supposed editors, Ravina and Rav Ashi. And it also impacts not only the history, but the understanding of the text. Are the words spoken by somebody contemporaneous or somebody hundreds of years later trying to understand what took place? For how many years have people been learning Stam? Well, it depends when the Stam was. Was it 1,000 years? Was it 1,500 years? And then Halivni shows up one day and Abba says, the Stam is late. In that little kernel was a radical rethinking, and of course was Mikarot to Misarot as he went through Shas page by page by page by page, explaining all of his ideas, including his idea the Stam was late. As a matter of fact, the Stam was late was almost a matter that we would joke about. When I was dating in college and I wanted to bring home a girl for my Abba to meet, and I would turn to Shai and I would say to Shai, do you think Abba will like her? This was before Laura. And he would say, what does she think about the Stam? Is she going to tell Abba that the stam is late or that the stam is early? This is the test. And so here is a person not only with radical, and I say the word radical, Jewish ideas, and he communicates them, and people listen. Like, where did that come from? Was he a great orator? Well, you've heard him speak. He was a very persuasive speaker, but it wasn't that he was a great orator. Of course, there was the power of his ideas, and I'm not even going to address those because those are going to be addressed by scholars for maybe thousands of years. But there was something else, and that's what I want to talk about today to Abba before he goes. And that's who was the person communicating those ideas? Did he look like a flaming radical, throwing out new ideas? When you looked at him, when you saw him, when you spoke to him, what did you get? You got authenticity. You got Torah. You've got Yiddishkeit in the most classic, traditional way. That was who he was. That was what he conveyed. His accent. I grew up as a child embarrassed. The man sounded like he left Sigget yesterday. For me as a child growing up in America, I was jealous of my friends who had American parents, who had American accents. How lucky are they, as I thought as a child. It wasn't only his accent. It was him. It was the way he dressed. It was the way he looked. It was everything told you that this person was the authentic. I keep using the word authenticity because that's what he was. This was a Talmid Chacham in the classic way. Nothing that he said could be dangerous to Yiddishkeit. Why? Look at him. Listen to him. Come up to his apartment. Look at all those Sfarim lying around. Who could have all those Sfarim lying around and throw out dangerous ideas? That was inconceivable. This was a man who could be trusted to preserve our traditions. And he was. He was to be trusted. But it was somebody like that who could convey his thinking, and you knew that you could trust him. You knew that this man, by the time he was 15 and got smicha, had already spent more hours learning Torah than any of us would learn in a lifetime. You knew that this man, by the time he reached that age, had knew Shas by heart. I asked him once, Abba, how come you never do the pin trick for me? I want to see the pin trick. You all know what the pin trick is. You stick in the pin and he can tell you all the words that it goes through. Abba, I want you to do the pin trick. He goes, what makes you think I can do the pin trick? I said, everybody knows that you can do the pin trick, Abba. Like, everybody knows. Do it. He goes, I have never done the pin trick. I go, what do you mean? Everybody knows that you do it. He goes, what sort of Jew would stick a pin in the Shas? He goes, but you can point to the second word on the third line, and I will tell you all the second word, third lines on the volume going all the way through to the rest of the volume. So that was his pin trick. And boy, he was very good at pin tricks. And it was a little bit hard when he would come up with his ideas for somebody to say, well, the guy who can do the pin trick is somebody who I can't trust with our tradition. And so his radical, transformative ideas gained an audience. People who knew that they could trust him. And then there was his sense of humor. He had such a good sense of humor. They were, again, I didn't appreciate it as a kid. They were all old Jewish jokes. How can old Jewish jokes be funny when they're told by what I thought was an old man telling old Jewish jokes? And in fact, he loved them. The problem with his Jewish jokes was he would start to tell, and he would start laughing at his own joke before the punchline. And you go, Abba, please finish the joke. I want to laugh too. And his jokes were also something that he used with immense pedagogical skill. Even the joke that Shai just told. Think about that. It sounds like it's a great little story. You know, the little boy says, but the one who lost it, he woke up even earlier. And it sounds just like a cute little joke. Abba used it to such effect because Before that line of the little boy, the story you're hearing is a classic Jewish tale of somebody gets up to do a mitzvah, to go to shul and say slichot, and gets rewarded. We believe that. You do good, you'll get rewarded. It's what we say in the Shema. It's what we believe in, as hard as it is to explain theologically. That is what we believe. But what does that little boy do when he asks this question? He upends the entire theology with this little joke. He says, but this theology doesn't work because the poor guy who lost the coin got up even earlier. What do we do with that? And that's how Saba told jokes. He could employ jokes that would communicate. It was an old Jewish joke, right? We're safe with an old Jewish joke. But he could use those old Jewish jokes to communicate his thinking, his radical transformative thinking. And if I had to describe him, I would say this radical traditionalist, a traditional radical, I'm not sure it matters, but he was able to integrate the two. He could move in the world of academia, and yet he can move in the traditional world of Torah. And he could integrate the two and live with the two. And how would he integrate? What I would sometimes say to him, Abba, when the two conflict, what do you do? And he said, well, there's always a way to find them not to conflict, as his book on the biblical criticism best illustrates. But that's when he said one of his sort of famous things that I've seen reposted in a lot of posts that have come out recently. And he said, there are people that I can daven with, but I can't really talk to. And there are people that I could talk to, but they don't really know how to daven. And ultimately, as a traditionalist, he would say, I can live without talking, can't live without davening. And that was his choice. And I know I'm going on, but just a little bit more. I know it's Rosh Chodesh and the question of Hespedim on Rosh Chodesh, but there's an exception for Talmidei Chachamim, and I think we qualify for that exception here today. So once I experienced with him something that illustrated that point, that the tension between the traditional and the radical. It was when he was the rabbi of Kehilat Orach Eliezer. He was the rabbi of a shul, mostly younger people in their 20s. And it was a Chag, and it was time for Yizkar. And before Yizkar, he got up to speak, and he said, I know a lot of you customarily leave shul during Yizkar, if your parents are still alive. That is the custom. I want to tell you right now, there is zero halachic basis for that. I know it's a custom that people have engaged in. We Jews have lost friends, family, Holocaust, wars, Israel, army, everything. We have lost people. We can stay in. There is no halachic impediment. You do not have to leave. The only halachic basis for leaving is if your parents would want you to leave. If your parents are superstitious, if they believe in this Baba Maisa, he said, then you should go out of Kibbut Aveh. After he gave that talk, as you can imagine, a lot of people stayed, but some people still left. I stayed. My father was alive, my mother was alive, but I stayed. He looks over to me in horror and he comes running over. He goes, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? I go, I just listened to what you said. He goes, out! Out! Nothing for me was a better illustration of how, when he felt his mind, which wrote his books, conflicted with his heart, which was the soul, his Jewish soul, I knew which would win out. And so now I want to say goodbye to this remarkable Abba who was able to combine a dedication with and his love of Torah and learning and Yiddishkeit with an academic mind that was able to blossom at Columbia University. And as I say goodbye to Abba, I know what he's doing right now. Sitting and learning. He's sitting and learning. I know what he's learning. He's learning Chulin. Because he was in the middle of Chulin when he passed away. I know what daf he's learning. He's in daf mem. Because when he was on daf mem, he wrote Mekarotu Misarot up to daf mem, and then he suffered the first of his mini strokes, and he couldn't go on. And he's sitting with his grandfather, who's learning with him. And they're arguing over the Gemara. And his grandfather is remarking how this is the same little Duvidal, and he got even smarter all these years. And I know the table they're sitting at, it's the table of the Leviathan with all the other tzaddikim. He's taken his place with his grandfather and all the other tzaddikim in heaven. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching him, and all the other Talmidei Chachamim and tzaddikim at this table are watching him because they know what's going to happen. He's going to be there just a short while. And like that little boy, he's going to raise his hand and say, I have just one little question. And they're all going to say, oh no, here it comes. And even HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who knows all, is going to wonder what new radical transformative idea this little boy, because he's going to be back, his little boy, learning with his grandfather. What is this little boy going to ask? Goodbye, Abba.
הקביע בן מהללל אומר, הסתכל בשלושה דברים ואין אתה בא לידי עבירה אדמה, באת ולאן אתה הולך, ולפני מי אתה עתיד ליתן דין וחשבון, מהאם באת ולאן אתה הולך, למקום עפר עם מוות עוליה, ולפני מי אתה עתיד ליתן דין וחשבון, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיב אפו ולא יהיר כל חמתו. קדיש.
יתברך, ישבח, יתפאר, יתרומם, יתנשא, ויתהדר, יתעלה, ויתהלל, שמך וקדושה בריאו. לעיל אמן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בעלמא ויראו. אמן. יהי שממה רבן, שמיה וחיים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ויראו. אמן. עשה שלום ומעט, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויראו. אמן.
קהל נכבד, מסע לוויה יוצא לבית העלמין בהר הזיתים. אוטובוס הועמד לרשות המלווים פה למטה. מי שנוסע ברכב לרשום בווייז מלון 7 הקשתות. שם ניפגש וניכנס לחלקה. ידידים וקרובים מתכבדים בנסיעת המיטה, הבנים יבואו לפני המיטה. ויהי נועם אדוני אלוהינו עלינו, מעשה ידינו פנינה עלינו, מעשה ידינו לפני מי? אתה עתיד ליתן דין וחשבון לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית והרבה להשיב אפו ולא יאיר כל חמתו. קדיש.
Gedal v'kadash shemech rabah Vilna divrach yirutech yamich machutech V'chaim yechon v'yamichon v'chadye l'chol Beit Yisrael V'agara v'zman k'rivet v'yru amei V'chon v'rach v'amei al-maya Yitbarach v'shtabach v'par v'termam v'znasei V'yitadar v'alev v'chalal shemech Rihu Leila min kol b'chatav v'shirata tush b'chatav v'nachamata d'amiram v'elma v'imru amen Yehei shema rabbanim shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Yaseh shalom Rabbi Yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen
Amen. V'ino amadonu Eloheinu aleinu masi yadeinu Amena aleinu masi yadeinu k'nirei שבסתר עליון וצריך שדה יתלונן. אמר לנו ולשים את צדקי לא יפתח בו כי הוא יד שלך לבוא ותות שדה תחת כנפיו תכסה צינה ושופרה אמיתו לא תירא מפחד לילה חץ יעוף יומם מדבר יעבוד אבל מכל לא לברכה מלך עורף ימין מצביעו והרי בשלותי הקביעה בין מעלמים אומר שקד לשלושה תולים בין החיים לאברהם ומיון ויין בת והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית והרבה להשיב אפו ולא יאיר כל חמתו. קדיש.
Gedal v'kadash shemech rabah Vilna divrach yirutech yamich machutech V'chaim yechon v'yamichon v'chadye l'chol Beit Yisrael V'agara v'zman k'rivet v'imru amen Yitbarach v'shtabach v'par v'termam v'znasei V'yitadar v'alev v'chalal shemech v'yitzah rihu Leila min kol b'chatav v'shirata tush b'chatav v'nachamata d'amiram v'alma v'imru amen Yehei shlama rabbanim shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Yaseh shalom Rabbi Yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen
בבקשה לעלות לאוטובוס או ברכבים נפגשים במלון שבע קשתות ליד מלון שבע קשתות